What's up, everybody? I am Brett L. Pape, and I am here live on the Coach Approach with my main guy, Coach Bruce. Coach Bruce, how the hell are you, brother?
We're back, man. It's been a while, man. It's exciting to get back on the mic tonight and talk about some playoff football. The fantasy season for 2022 is over, but you and I being massive dynasty guys, it really never is over. You've got some trade offers going out. I've got some trade offers going out. We're figuring out what leagues are going to get renewed and who's staying and who's going and all that fun stuff. So it's an exciting time for football for sure.
It sure is. And I'll tell you what, it didn't take long for teams to make some changes right off the bat. So we're going to jump right into the 2022 season ending news and notes. And the first is, good old LVII Smith. LVII Smith, after winning his last game of the season as the Texans head coach, I think it was about a good hour and a half later, the media started reporting of his firing. He had one season as the head coach of the Texans. It's the second year in a row the Texans have hired a coach, a black coach at that, and they got fired after their first season. For me, I read some reports going into Week 17 game for the Texans, and the reports were that LVII kind of wanted him to kind of get a little idea of what his future was like for the Houston Texans. And he didn't, from what I heard, he didn't get a lot of positive answers. He didn't get anything that would seem to be reassuring. So it seemed to me like LVII Smith left those meetings and say, hey, let's go get a win. And by getting a win in the Week 17 game, they no longer have the first pick. And as soon as that happened, LVII Smith gets fired. What were your thoughts, Coach?
My thoughts are very similar to yours. I mean, I think you take and I joke around about this, as you know, I do Project 32 and break down all the teams, and a big piece of that is coaching and what I think those teams are going to look like heading into that season. And the combined age, I think, of the last two coaches is about 180 years old. So, but hey, I'm a LVII Smith guy. You know, he's a guy that I think deserved another opportunity, and I think I would have liked to see. But look, Houston Texans were competitive all year long. They were in a lot of games. They obviously had a little run there towards the end. They took Kansas City to it. They took Dallas through it. They obviously ended up winning on a what looked like basically a Hail Mary throw to Jordan Akins, and then go for two for the win, basically saying, hey, if I'm not coming back next year, I think that's exactly what happened. Is they had a talk in the locker room, and everybody rallied around, let's win one for the Gipper, and let's send off LVII Smith the right way. And they went out and they won a game and bumped themselves into the number 2 hole. If Chicago can't trade out and they end up taking a Will Anderson or the guy's name, why can't I think of his name right now?
Carter from Georgia.
Yeah, there you go, Jalen Carter. If you don't, or you pick one of those two guys, then Houston's still going to get the quarterback they're going to get at number 1 anyway. Now, we think Chicago's probably trading out of that. I think it's very likely 85% chance they trade out of that number 1 spot and move back, and they can still get an impact player. But crazy finish to the season. I would have loved to see LVII Smith come back for another year personally, because I felt like the culture he was building was going in the right direction. They got to figure out the quarterback position. There's a lot of holes on that team, and I think it's probably the least talented roster in the league. But so to get out of him what he did, I thought was pretty commendable.
Yeah, I totally agree. He should obviously be getting a little more respect and not be getting a pink slip right now. But someone else has got a pink slip in your own backyard, and that Arizona Cardinals coach, Cliff Kingsbury. My first thought on it is Cliff Kingsbury, if he doesn't want to coach at all right now, he's going to be making a lot of money for the next 4 years, as they just signed to a 5-year contract at the beginning of the season. My second thought was it was the right move. Sometimes you got to know when you made a mistake and when it's time to cut the bait. They didn't have any problem cutting the bait when they got rid of Josh Rosen after year 1 and going to Kyler Murray. And they showed that they didn't have the ability, or they didn't have any problem cutting the bait now. For whatever the reason, right off the bat, the 2022 season started off with a lot of turmoil for the Arizona Cardinals. You had all the drama related with Kyler Murray's contract. You had the situation where you didn't have DeAndre Hopkins the first 6 weeks because of allegedly taking steroids. There just seemed to be issue after issue for the Cardinals all year long. And I'm sure you know a hell of a lot more about it, again, as a lot of your family members are big Cardinal fans, and your newspaper that's dropped off of your front doorstep has news every day about the Cardinals. What are your thoughts on the Cliff Kingsbury firing?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it was time for him to go. There was some talk on Twitter when they got off to a slow start about If Matt Rule gets fired, why is Cliff Kingsbury still have a job? My response to that was Cliff Kingsbury had 3 years with the Cardinals, and each year that team had improved. So they went out and they got D-Hop last year. He had a great season. He had the 6-game suspension due to the PEDs. You bring in a Marquise Brown with him out. So now you think, hey, when D-Hop can come back and he's healthy, and then you add Marquise Brown to that, what James Conner did, you got Trey McBride, you have Zach Ertz. I think people felt like this team could be competitive in the NFC West, and it just didn't work out that way. And you could see by the midway point, usually Cliff Kingsbury starts out really strong and then fades at the end of the season. He never got it going this year. That offense never really had the fluidity that we thought we would have. So it was definitely time for him to go. And you could have made an argument that you could have fired him mid-season, but the Bidwells just are not known for that. I think they've done that one time in the history of the franchise. But it was time to move on. Of course, you have the Steve Keim fiasco as the GM, and he's had some issues off the field, and he's resigned and moved on. So that team is in a complete rebuild mode at this point.
But they do have the 4th overall pick. If they can find themselves a coach that can both motivate and get Kyler Murray going, they're not in a terrible situation. But regardless, let's move on. Before we get into us talking about our predictions for the NFL awards, we got to mention the Damar Hamlin situation. I jokingly talked to you today when you told me you were back in California. You live in the Phoenix area. I live in the LA area. And it seems I spend more time in the Phoenix area and you spend more time in the LA area with your job and all the family that I have out there. So I busted ass back last Monday to get back to watch the Monday Night Football game. I had a few leagues where obviously the championship of that league was still on the line. I wasn't playing in them, but I still was vestedly interested in who was going to win my home league championship. I turned the game on, and not very long after I turned it on, Damar Hamlin went in for a tackle. It appeared as if he took a helmet directly to the chest area. Didn't seem all that scary, which made it even more scary because soon after he got up and he fell back down, and we all know the rest. But so thankful. Saw today in the news that Damar Hamlin was released from the hospital. He's going to be receiving treatment still through Buffalo hospitals as well as the Buffalo Bills medical team. But tell you what, that was a scary situation. And despite all the ramifications that it may have had on fantasy football championships and or AFC championship game implications on who's going to host and who and all this other stuff, none of that matters. I think what so many people need to realize is that, and you and I have coached high school football for a long time. We don't do it any longer. You may be doing it again. I won't be. But we've seen our shares of our own injuries, and usually it's related to broken limbs. Nothing quite as serious as this. And these are people. And so anything that may have happened towards affecting playoffs or fantasy championships didn't matter. So glad to see Damar Hamlin coming back as far as his health. So glad to hear that he has no long-term issues related to neurologically, and he's all there. And, it could have been a lot worse. Just thankful we are where we are right now.
No, hey, and I'm a 6'2", 290-pound guy. I'm a big dude, but I cry very easily when it comes to certain things. And having played the game at the college level and coached it for a long time, it's the scariest thing when you see it. And I actually missed it. I was watching the game, and I don't know if I got up to do something. I turned my head for a second or what. I saw the play, and the next thing I know, I see, the medical team coming out, and the players kind of huddled around. And I had to rewind it back, and then they showed the replay of him getting up, and then all of a sudden just falling back. And that was probably, I still get the chills on the back of my neck even talking about it. It was a very, very scary situation. It was great to see him be able to communicate with his team through social media during the Week 18 game and Naheem Hines. I mean, you get the opening kickoff, you take it back for a touchdown. Talk about an amazing thing. And just the way Sean McDermott and Zach Taylor handled that whole situation, those teams will be forever linked, as if they're not already, from competition on the field. But from the fantasy community, and he tried to raise $2,500 for this toy deal that he does, and they ended up raising over $9 million last time I saw. Just the outpouring of respect, and I'm in a ton of leagues. I know you are, and I know in every single league that I was in, the people in the championship game either decided to split it. If it was enough of a blowout, they typically would give it to the guy that was ahead by enough. And I never had a situation in any of my leagues where both people just didn't say, hey, look, whatever the commissioner decides to do, we're in. That was great to see in this community too. So hey, prayers up for Damar Hamlin. It's just absolutely awesome to know that neurologically he's all there. He's on the road to recovery. Whether he plays another down of football or not is really not the important factor right now. He's healthy. He's home. He's going to continue to get treatment, but he looks like he's on an upward swing, and thank God for that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So continue progress, Damar Hamlin. Thankful for your current health situation, and it continues. All right, Coach. So we started with yards per, right? And I would say right before the season kicked off back in August, and we had our first show. At our first show, we talked about our own predictions and so forth. And we both wanted to go back and take a listen to what you and I said. And unfortunately, with work starting back up for me and me having to drive kids to Tucson and Flagstaff and you having to drive out here, neither one of us really did it. But one of the predictions you made at the beginning of the year, I got to give you some props for. And that's you came out on the limb and you thought that good old Justin Jefferson would pop off for 2,000 yards receiving. I didn't quite get to that number, but damn did he get close. And if it wasn't for probably his two worst performances of the season, coming in week 16 and week 17, he probably would have got there. But with that being said, let's jump into who we think are going to be the NFL award winners for the 2022-23 season. At MVP, let's start that right off the bat. At MVP, for me, it's Patrick Mahomes. This guy from day one, the Kansas City Chiefs traded up, selected Patrick Mahomes out of Texas Tech with the 10th overall pick. He didn't play it down until week 16 that year when he played in a meaningless game against the Denver Broncos. And then year two comes. He comes out year two, throws for 50 touchdowns, leads the Kansas City Chiefs to the AFC Championship game. And then Patrick Mahomes, he was born and he's been incredible. And ironically, with a year where he lost Tyreek Hill and they replaced him with guys like Juju Smith and MFS and
Sky Moore,
and Sky Moore and this and that, it didn't seem to matter. Here goes Patrick Mahomes. He completes 435 passes of 648 for 5,250 yards with 41 touches. He adds another 358 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns. The guy it doesn't matter with him. It literally doesn't matter. I feel like you and I are both former high school receivers. We could come up with a pretty good season with Patrick Mahomes today if he was our quarterback. Yeah. So Patrick Mahomes is my MVP.
Yeah, it's Patrick Mahomes for me too. And you touched on the Tyreek Hill and the Band-Aids they tried to put on the wide receiver position. Of course, Travis Kelce absolutely exploded at 33 years old and had a hell of a year too. But you had a running back by committee. You had CEH to start the year off. Pacheco started taking some of those touches away as the season went on. You had Jet McKinnon late to that backfield. And of course, we know what he did down the stretch. He probably won some people some leagues. But he had a career high this year at 67% completion rate. He had a career high with 5,250 yards without that dynamic receiver that could really take the top off. He worked what we felt like he would do before the season, that short to intermediate areas of the field, put his players in good situations. And, of course, Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy, what they do offensively there, absolutely phenomenal. I think it was Patrick Mahomes' best season. This is even going the 50-touchdown season, I think, because of what the expectations were coming in this year and what was supposed to be in the AFC West between Denver and the Raiders and the Chargers and all the hype about that being the best division in football. And he goes 14-3 and not only wins the division, but gives them the number one seed in the AFC. So I'm with you. I think it's Patrick Mahomes. I don't even think it's close.
There you go. Let's move on to Offensive Player of the Year. Yeah. Offensive Player of the Year was the guy that I gave you props for calling out and saying he was going to have an incredible year, and he did have an incredible year. That's Justin Jefferson. 128 receptions, 1,809 yards, and 8 touchdowns. You'd like to see the touchdowns a little bit higher, but what impressed me so much was not just his stats. It was his game play ability where he's just made play after play in huge situations. I can't remember what game it was, but it was like week 8 or 9 where he made a catch one-handed over the top that led to Minnesota coming back and winning the game. It's Justin Jefferson for me, and you say not close. It probably could be close because you got guys like Jalen Hurts, and you got guys like Allen and Buffalo. For me, it's Justin Jefferson, though.
Yeah, I think it's Justin Jefferson too. And we knew with Kevin O'Connell what he would do in terms of how they used Cooper Kupp when he was with Sean McVay with the Rams. They would do a lot of similar things with Justin Jefferson, moving him around, using him in motion, using condensed formations, giving him free releases. But what he is, he's Cooper Kupp with more verticality. He's a guy that can get the 50-50 ball. He can stretch teams vertically. He can do things horizontally. Yeah, I mean, I don't even think there's a debate there. I think for Offensive Player of the Year, Jalen Hurts is certainly a guy you could put on that list. You could put CMC, what he did down the stretch. You can put Saquon Barkley on there. For me, it's still Justin Jefferson, so I'm with you there, man. We're 2 for 2. I think we're
about to be 3 for 3.
Probably are, yeah.
And here we go, Defense Player of the Year, and that's a guy out of Ohio State, and that's Nick Bosa. San Francisco has won 10 straight games. Their defense has been absolutely incredible during this stretch. And great, we can talk about Mr. Irrelevant and everything he has done, which has been absolutely incredible for a rookie quarterback to do what he's done in the situation that he's in. But the Defensive Player of the Year for me is Nick Bosa with 18.5 sacks, 41 solo tackles, 2 forced fumbles. And he's just been such a, his leadership role and just everything about him. He's exactly what they wanted when they drafted him so high 5 years ago.
Yeah, look, and he finished second in the league behind Max Crosby with 19 tackles for loss, and he was first in the NFL with 56 pressures. 49ers were first in points against, second in yards allowed, and second in rushing yards allowed. And the thing about Nick Bosa is, like, it's not like Micah Parsons. Early in the season, Dallas really moved him around a lot, right? When they stopped doing that and kind of put Micah Parsons in the same spot, it seemed like you started to see a little bit of those numbers come down. I think that was the difference. And I think Nick Bosa in the second half of the season, to me, in my opinion, ran away with Defensive Player of the Year. I know there's other guys on there you could certainly consider, Micah Parsons, Max Crosby. But Fred Warner, I think, is a guy that should get some votes there. But Nick Bosa is the heart and soul of that defense. And what he did this season, I thought was absolutely tremendous. I mean, he's got such unbelievable skill set, whether it's a power rush, whether it's getting a good lean, whether it's a speed rush. He's got so many things in his toolbox as a defensive end, how he can disrupt teams offensively. You have to game plan for that guy. So, yeah, I think it's Nick Bosa for sure. So we're 3 for 3. There you go.
We are, but we're about to change that.
I think we are.
We are about to change that. And I have no problem saying that this pick is biased, but I also take great pride in the fact that I'm not way off base picking them just simply because I love this guy. And that's Garrett Wilson out of the New York Jets. Garrett Wilson had to come into a situation with a second-year quarterback or is it a third-year quarterback? Who cares? Zach Wilson. Obviously, he had a terrible year. So he had to work with guys like Zach Wilson. He had to work with guys like
Joe Flacco.
Mike White. He had to deal with Joe Flacco. And then he also had another quarterback who I've never heard of, a 28-year-old guy who came in the game and played late one night. Irrelevant. The kid puts up 83 receptions, 1,103 yards receiving with 4 touchdowns. You always talk about pick talent. Fantasy football managers always pick talent over situation because obviously his quarterback situation was awful, yet Garrett Wilson's talent rode throughout the season, and he's my offensive rookie of the year. I know we differ on this one, so why don't you tell me who you like?
Yeah, and I went back and forth on this one, but I ended up going with Kenneth Walker. And we're in a league together. I had the 1.01 or 1.02, and I took Breece Hall, and then I took Kenneth Walker, and I could have gone Garrett Wilson. I could have gone Chris Olave.
Hey, stop real quick.
Yeah.
Stop real quick.
I wasn't going to bring this up, but I know exactly where you're going with this.
You freaking robbed the hell out of me to get the 101. And in reality, I just gave it to you. I send you an offer, and you're like, hell yeah, I'll take that. But continue. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, since you bring it up, I mean, I won't say who you traded, Ryan Fitzpatrick, for the 1.01, but I guess I'll say it. I feel like it's Kenneth Walker because, I mean, look, he missed week 1. I think it was an ankle injury, if I remember correctly. And then he plays the next 4 games behind Rashad Penny, who got off to a great start, ended last year in 2021 with a great run. And there's a lot of people that felt like, hey, Kenneth Walker didn't show that he could catch the football. He didn't have the targets at the college level. Well, the 2 schools he played at are not known for targeting the running back position. If you watch Michigan State, you kind of knew the offense he was in there. But If you look at what he did, he only had 23 carries for 146 yards and 1 touchdown through the first 4 games he played. Then he went on to finish with 228 carries, went over 1,000 yards, had 9 touchdowns, and added 27 grabs for the 165 yards. And over the last 3 weeks of the season, he ran for 354 yards, 4 touchdowns against the Chiefs, the Jets. Those first 2 teams are Chris Jones and what the Jets can do up front. Those are pretty good run defenses. And look, we'll just throw the Rams out there because that was who he played with the last game. And then help lead the Seahawks into the playoffs. They needed some help in Week 18. They got the help they needed. The Seahawks are now in the playoff. They have their guy now. I'm going back to beast mode. I feel like Kenneth Walker is that true 3-down back. I was very high on him in the offseason. If you had in the right landing spot and you got in a good run game, he would be very relevant. And so maybe that's me being a little bit biased because I was so big on him in the offseason. But I just think what he did down the stretch and what he did as soon as he took over in Week 6 and on, he was lights out. So, I mean, he had 5 games over 100 yards over the last 11 games. So he was a big part of that offense and a big reason why the Seahawks are now in the playoffs.
There you go. I can't even argue with it because the stats are right where you're talking. And despite the fact that I don't have many teams with him on it, I like Kenneth Walker. And there's no reason to – in fact, I look at a lot of dynasty rankings because I'm always on there. And I look at different guys' rankings. And he's in a lot of guys' rankings as a top 10 dynasty player right now. And you really can't fault anyone for putting him up there. But let's move on. Let's go to Defensive Rookie of the Year. And I know I already have a Jet player as the Offensive Rookie of the Year. We're going to go with another Jet. I talk about a team that if they just would have got the quarterback right 2 years ago, they would be in a different situation.
Could have had Justin Fields there.
They could have had, regardless. Yeah. They do have Sauce Gardner, and that's my Defensive Rookie of the Year. 75 tackles, 2 interceptions. And just week in and week out, he faced the number 1 receiver of every team that he faced, and he only gave up 33 receptions for the year. It's Sauce Gardner for me.
Yeah, it's Sauce Gardner for me too. He's 6'3", 200 with 4.4 speed. We're seeing a lot of defensive coordinators in the NFL game change a little bit. Height wasn't necessarily a requirement. If you look at Darrelle Revis and Revis Island, you look at a lot of the guys back in the day that were really good. Green from the Redskins for many years. Now you look at what they have now, and you're seeing Dallas does it. They try to get these corners that have length, that have speed, that have a combination of size and strength, and he fits that model. And I think he's going to be the best corner in the NFL for a long time. I mean, he finished first in passes defense with 20. He was first in ball hawk rate. This is all off next gen stats. Second in target expected points added at negative 29.7. He was 4th in coverage success rate across the entire league. As a rookie, tied for 5th in yards per attempt, 5.2 yards per attempt. He was a guy you just didn't want to target, and he still finished with 75 tackles. He was a corner that was not afraid to come up and stick his nose in there again in the run game on the edges either. So I love Sauce Gardner. I think the Jets have one of the best building blocks and rosters in youth moving forward, and you hit on it. If they can find and hit at the quarterback position, this Jets team is going to be a team that's going to be feared for a long time.
Well, they're going to look much better next year with Derek Carr at quarterback, but we will move on.
Oh, it's a whole nother conversation. There you go.
Yes, it is. But we'll get in. We have plenty of time. We're going to talk about where the coach approach is going to go during the offseason later on after we get through all the playoff previews. But let's talk about some of the fantasy hits and misses for the 2022 season. There are a lot of people talking about Austin Eckler. Yeah. And there are a lot of people who talked about Spiller out of Texas A&M possibly coming in and kind of taking over a little bit of a role, even though he had low draft capital, which a lot of people thought Isaiah Spiller was going to be drafted higher. But, it just seems like when you've got a running back who's a non-drafted, he wasn't drafted out of college, and he looks more like a scat back. He looks more like a third down type of back. He's the whole reason why I'm blanking, and I don't know why I'm blanking. It's probably because of old age. But the guy, Melvin Gordon, Melvin Gordon, if he doesn't hold out back in 2019, we don't even know if we get to see this Austin Eckler. Yeah. But here we are now. Austin Eckler finishes first in points for running backs. He has 18 touchdowns, 915 yards rushing, 107 receptions for 722 yards. I'll tell you, if you banked on him and you took him in redrafts in the first round, you were right to do so. He's definitely a hit in 2022.
No, and hey, I love the Austin Eckler pick. He was a guy that some people, you talk about age apex for running backs and those things, and with them bringing Isaiah Spiller in, and what was that going to look like for Austin Eckler? And that's a great choice. I went Jalen Hurts. He finished as the QB3 this year. His rise as a passer was absolutely astronomical from last year, being his first year as a full starter, to this year. In 15 games, he led the Eagles to a 15-1 record. In his starts, 15-1 record, while completing 66.5% of his passes for well over for 3,700 yards and 22 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions. And if you look at what he did on the ground, now you get another 760 yards on the ground and 13 more touchdowns. So he counted for almost 4,500 yards and 35 total touchdowns. He was a QB1 in fantasy points per game at 25.6. Had he played a full 17, he's probably the QB1. Now, that was the thing. You know, me being a Cowboys fan, it was always funny when we'd have conversations about Wentz versus Dak. We all know how that played out. But, you know, now I'll take Hurts over Dak all day long. We talked about the offseason. There was a lot of people that saw the rushing upside and felt like what we saw last year was enough for a lot of guys to put him in the top 5 quarterbacks. I wasn't there yet. I had him at QB7 preseason. I saw the rushing upside, but I was like, hey, I'm probably going to be a little bit late to the party if it pans out. When they went out and got AJ Brown, I was a little bit worried that might be a step back for AJ Brown because of the rushing upside of Jalen Hurts and what the offense looked like last year. But Jalen Hurts, man, his rise as a passer was absolutely unbelievable. And now, and I did pick the Eagles to win the division in the preseason, but I feel like, man, what a phenomenal jump. And now you look at moving on. I don't know. Yeah, Patrick Mahomes can continue to do what he's doing. At some point, Travis Kelce's going to retire. But one thing I've learned is I'm not going to doubt Patrick Mahomes anymore. But Jalen Hurts is that guy that's in that QB1 conversation for the next 10 years, as long as he's healthy. So it was just hard for me to pass up on Jalen Hurts, not just
hey, listen,
where his ADP was.
I'm right there with you. And in fact, I wrote down 4 guys that I thought were hits based off of ADP and based off of what a lot of people predicted going into the season. Yeah. But a lot of people were worried about what this was going to do to A.J. Brown. Like we're going from an offense where A.J. Brown was exclusively used as the number 1 guy, where you had a guy like Ryan Tannehill, where you didn't have to worry about rushing production. And what was this going to do to A.J.? It did nothing to A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown is as good as he's ever been. And
Devontae Smith had a big rise.
Yeah, so, I have no problem with that. We're going to go through a couple more guys that I thought are worth mentioning as hits. If you drafted Josh Jacobs in the 6th, I mean, you and I were both in at least 2 startup dynasty drafts last year, because we created both those leagues. And Josh Jacobs was going in the 6th, 7th, or 8th round. And here he comes, and he finishes 3rd in running back points. I mean, I'll tell you, from week 4 to week 10, you didn't want any other running back. Josh Jacobs, holy crap. Yeah. And for him to not get that 5th-year contract guaranteed, and to do what he did, talk about banking on yourself. That guy, he put up a hell of a season. And the other guy I wanted to mention was someone who struggled with injuries because he's so involved in the blocking as a tight end, and that's George Kittle.
Yeah.
And ironically, it seemed that after my boy Trey Lance got hurt in week 2,
and then my boy
Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt.
You'll get to
it. But what I'm getting at is that you lose your 2 top quarterbacks, and then he really blew up with Brock Purdy, right?
Yeah, Brock Purdy figured out real quick, especially with Debo being out, who my guy's going to be. And Kyle Shanahan, there was a play design he had. I'll never forget this.
Wasn't that beautiful?
Fake screen right,
fake screen left, hit him right down the middle.
Yeah, I sent that, and I do this all the time with the head coach of Liberty High School, where I used to coach at, that's ranked nationally, and I sent that to him. And I was that guy when I was an OC. Nickname was Big Balls, because I wasn't afraid to throw some crazy screen game or some
that's the only reason why you got that nickname.
Yeah, well, there's other reasons too, but that was the big thing. Was I sent the play to him, and he started laughing. He's like, I'm already on it. But it's just an unbelievable play design, and you hit on it. Fake screen left, fake screen right, and you just delay, and then you pop. You have that pop pass to the tight end on the seam, and he's wide open, goes in for a touchdown. Kittle's absolutely. I mean, he's my tight end 3 in the offseason, but George Kittle, yeah. A lot of people had him, further down with some concerns there, but with, again, because he's used so much in the run game. And if you ask George Kittle, he'll tell you, I'd rather block somebody on their ass than catch a touchdown pass.
Have you ever seen any of his videos where he's doing just what you're talking about? And the whole time he's mic'd up and he's just laughing. He's like, I love this game. I just freaking pummeled you to the ground. And he's sitting there talk about embarrassing. If I'm the guy getting blocked to the ground in a pancake block and the guy's laughing the whole time, that can't be fun for that defensive end that he's blocking.
Yeah, and you could get into some misses too. I mean, you could talk about Kyle Pitts. You could talk about, and of course Dak Prescott was hurt for 5 games, but he did not have the season. A lot of people that like me that drafted him higher, coming off what he did last season in the passing game, and you get CeeDee Lamb. I think it's going to take a big rise in year 3, which he did. But there are some big misses too. I mean, for sure. But,
well, there are. I mean, you know what? Here's the deal: if you have an injury, it's still a miss.
Yeah.
I mean, and so Jonathan Taylor, I mean, I'll tell you what, I'm more of a 1 quarterback guy than I am a super flex guy. And Jonathan Taylor in all of 1 quarterback leagues, he was the 101 going into the season. And what he did this year didn't do, again, injuries suck, but it still hurts and it's still the same. It's still a miss. And for me, the next guy for me, and this is personal because there's not many, I guess, truthers for Rashad Bateman more than me. And for him to not be able to stay healthy in a season where Baltimore needed a true number 1 receiver, it was tough. And, I hope that doesn't stay. I hope that we can get I expected 1,000-yard receiving season and 8 to 12 touches out of Rashad Bateman.
I was a Bateman truther too. He's my wide receiver.
That one hurt. And you already mentioned Kyle Pitts. That one hurts, but it's tough and obviously, even Cam Akers early, but I'll tell you what, a lot of people that I don't know what to do with Cam Akers now. I sent you a message yesterday about a trade. And we won't get into the specifics because my league mate watches our show pretty regularly that I made the offer to.
Yeah.
But Cam Akers, I'll tell you, early on, whatever the reason, him and Henderson out of Memphis, they were kind of splitting roles and he wasn't happy. Next thing, he either went AWOL or I don't know why he went AWOL or whatever. And then they bring him back after the trade deadline because nobody wanted to trade for him. The guy was damn productive late in the year. I think I saw where he either had 100 yards rushing or a touchdown scored in the last 7 games that he played. And so I don't know what to do with Cam Akers, and I'll figure it out at some time. But this game, it is not an exact science for sure.
That's fantasy football, man. That's why we love it.
It is
coming back. Yeah.
I'm a big time former poker player. In fact, right here, I don't know if you see it. This is pictures from me when I used to play in the World Series of poker events. But my favorite guy that I was fortunate enough to play, you'd wear a black hat much like you wear right now, and that's Phil Hellmuth. And Phil Hellmuth used to always say,
he's a riot.
Phil Hellmuth used to always say, if there was no such thing as luck, I would never lose. Well, fantasy football is very similar. You can freaking go right down the book and draft the best guys available. But if you don't have a little bit of luck, it don't matter.
Oh, hey, 100%. I certainly won some leagues this year I probably shouldn't have. And I had some leagues that I was absolutely stacked in. And the amount of injuries this year was just unbelievable. That I feel great going to the next season now because I have those rosters now rolling over. Those guys are healthy. But, man, there was a lot of rosters. I was like, man, this is a championship team right here, and some of my best.
I truly believe if a guy named Breece Hall doesn't get hurt, I am doing very well in the Scott Fish Bowl. But that is just me and my bitterness coming out. And hopefully I get an opportunity for year 3 in the Scott Fish Bowl. If I don't, I'm grateful for the opportunity I got. But 2 years in a row where injuries have just absolutely killed me in the Scott Fishbowl. Are you ready to talk about playoff football?
Let's do it, man. Let's get into it.
All right. Here we go. First game of the week, Saturday, 4:30. It's not actually the first game. It's the first one that's on our calendar for the Coach Approach. And that's the 49ers. They're -10 over the Seahawks. 49ers have won 10 straight games. Seahawks have already overachieved with everything that they've done with a guy named Geno Smith, who was pretty much written off for dead after his time with the Jets and a number of other teams. But with guys like Kenneth Walker, you've already mentioned him, and guys like a rookie quarterback, Tariq Woolen, and Pete Carroll. I mean, the guy never seems to get enough credit as a coach. I know that when you and I talked back in August, when we started the show back up with our good friends over at Yards Per, we talked about the Seahawks in a perfect situation. Don't trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. Don't trade for a quarterback. Just ride this year out. Set yourself up for the 2023 draft. They didn't do that. They seemed to know that they had a guy in Geno Smith who was going to put him in position to where he wasn't going to lose games. And until he lost that receiver out of Kansas State, I'm blanking, slot receiver, help me out.
Tyler Lockett.
Until they lost him, kind of like the last couple weeks before he came back from that finger injury.
Yeah.
I mean, they were rolling offensively. And you got to be nothing but impressed with what good old Pete Carroll has done. But unfortunately, they're facing the 49ers. And I'll tell you, I would not be shocked. I don't care that they have a rookie quarterback. That team is set up for a big-time playoff run. So it's an easy win for me for the 49ers. What about you, Coach?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's just some of Kyle Shanahan's best work, and going out midseason and adding CMC to an offense that has George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk. Now you get Deebo Samuel back just at the right time. So for me, you already talked about the defensive side of the ball, and we talked about Nick Bosa earlier and Fred Warner and those guys. I just think this is a game that's going to get away from Seattle probably pretty quick. And Brock Purdy's done it. I mean, in the last 5 starts, he's got 11 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He's completing 67% of his passes. So I've got San Francisco winning this game. I'll give the 10 to Seattle. I'm okay with it if I was betting on it. I do think it's going to be that type of game. Seattle's going to have to protect the football. They're going to have to try to use clock. They're going to have to try to keep the San Francisco offense off the field. They're going to have to play a perfect football for 60 minutes to have an opportunity, in my opinion, to beat San Francisco. I just think that offense is humming right now with CMC and what they're doing with Kittle, that I just don't see San Francisco get much of a contest in this one. So,
you know what? It's funny. You keep bringing up CMC, and I love the guy. And no way what he has done since he's been there, and they're not afraid to utilize him in the passing game as they should. But getting Elijah Mitchell back last week, he had 10 carries for 55 yards.
Oh yeah,
in week 17. That's huge because he can do the dirty work. It allows CMC to kind of go in there, and he doesn't have to do all the dirty work. This team's scary. I would not be surprised at all if they have a long run.
I would not be surprised either. I've got them in the if I'm making my pick right now, I've got them in the Super Bowl. So there you go.
Ooh, there you go. All right, hey, let's move on. Number 5 seed in the AFC, Chargers at a -1 favorite over the number 4 seed, the Jaguars. It's Saturday night on NBC. Should be a great game to watch. The Jaguars, ironically, you kind of felt going into week 17 that it was going to be Trevor Lawrence who's going to lead them to victory. Tennessee, as you should not be surprised, because say what you want about Tennessee, but Mike Vrabel gets them ready to play every week. And that was 100%. A great game. Yeah. If it wasn't for a very close fumble or pass call, and it ended up being the fumble, that good old what's his name? Josh Allen, ironically, scooped and scored. The Jaguars might not even be here. But here we are, AFC wildcard game. But I'm taking the Chargers. I feel like Justin Herbert, what he has done his first 3 years in the NFL, it's first time making the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised to see them go on a big playoff run themselves. But I got the Chargers winning 27-24.
Yeah, if you talk about the Chargers, right? You lost Mike Williams for some games. You lost Keenan Allen for some games. You lost Rashawn Slater. You lost Corey Linsley, the center, who's a dynamic and the captain of that offensive line. So they dealt with a lot of injuries throughout the season. Now all of a sudden you're getting some people back. You've got Austin Eckler. You touched on him, the season he's having. You talk about Gerald Everett being an addition to that on the tight end position. So, and then you talk about Derwin James and what they're doing defensively there too. I just feel like I've got the Chargers on upset alert. Look, I think the Chargers win it, but I would not be surprised with what they're doing with Travis Etienne. And there's a lot of jokes about Christian Kirk getting overpaid. You've got Marvin Jones. You've got that receiver core there that's kind of was patched together. But they're playing well. Zay Jones had a heck of a season. We talked about
and they're at home.
They're at home. And they're at home. And so
I feel like more than any other sport, home field advantage matters more in the NFL than any other sport.
Yeah, and hey, Doug Peterson's been there before. He won a Super Bowl with the Eagles, so he understands, and nobody expected the Eagles to make that run that year. But because it's at home, I think this is a very close game. I do have the Chargers on upset alert. I would not be surprised if Jacksonville wins, but I'm going to go with who my preseason pick was here on the chart with the Chargers to win in the first round and advance. So I've got the Chargers as well. I just think there's too much firepower with everybody coming back. I think the Chargers get it done.
There you go. Hey, let's move on to the Sunday game, and that's the number 7 Dolphins at the number 2 Bills. Ironically, I mean, who gives a shit about what happened after the injury to Hamlin? But the Bills being the number 2 seed might have been a raw deal for them, but here we are nevertheless. It's unfortunate we talk about injuries. It's unfortunate that we're not going to probably see Tua in the game, and that leaves us with rookie Skylar Thompson having to play. So for me, the Bills kind of they may have got a raw deal having to play this game, but I can't see the Bills losing this one.
No, I think with everything that did happen to Damar Hamlin, and you talk about how the season ended last year, I have always felt through the offseason Buffalo was my Super Bowl champion prediction. I still think it's Buffalo, and now you add everything that they are playing for on top of that, how the Damar Hamlin situation was handled, the leadership of Sean McDermott. You add Naheem Hines, you're starting to see James Cook come on. Devin Singletary, I think, had a better year than I think a lot of people thought he would. Then you add Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Dawson Knox. I mean, you just go on and on and on. You can talk about the offensive side of the ball, what they've done defensively. I just think I like Skylar Thompson coming out. I feel like he was a guy that had a really good career as a really good backup, and I think he'll be in the league for a long time. But he's not a guy that's going to go into Buffalo with everything that Buffalo's got going on right now. I don't give Miami a chance. I mean, this is the closest thing that you're going to get to what we saw in the College Football National Championship in the first round of the playoffs. It won't be that bad, but because it's not going to be 65, but I think Buffalo runs away with this, and I would not be surprised they drop a 45 burger on them, and Miami's going to be lucky, I think, to get out of there with 17 points.
Can you imagine that crowd if Damar was on the sidelines?
Can you imagine if somehow Damar Hamlin shows up in the playoffs?
Yeah, oh my God, it's going to be nuts. It's going to be nuts.
So,
all right, hey, let's move on to the other Sunday night. Well, the second of 3 Sunday games, and that's number 6 Giants and the number 3 Vikings. The Vikings are a -3 favorite. The Giants and Vikings just played a Week 16 thriller in Minnesota, won by the Vikings 27-24.
A 61-yard ball.
61-yard field goal. My first thought is this, and that is the new coach, which you are a huge fan of the Giants' new coach. Who is it?
Brian Daboll.
That guy has not been playing well. And Daniel Jones is their quarterback for the future. They don't have to worry about it. And if you're a New York Giant fan, I think you need to put that whole debate to rest, because there aren't that many Patrick Mahomes. There aren't that many guys that are transition generational talents.
You got 17
you got a guy like
teams.
Daniel Jones who can do it in both aspects of the game. He keeps you off balance because he can beat you in the run game, because the guy rushed for over 600 yards rushing. I like the Giants, and I do a lot. I think this is going to be a close game, but I'll go ahead and go with the Vikings just again because that home field does mean a lot.
So this one comes down to coaching for me, and you already know where I'm at with Brian Daboll. I think the Giants upset Minnesota. Minnesota Hey, great record. You can talk about all their fourth quarter comebacks. You can talk about all the one score games that they've won. It's an NFL record. I think it was 11 games by one score or less that they won. I just think that at some point you have a -3 point differential. It is the only team to win that many games and be negative, have more points scored on you versus points scored over the course of an entire season. I think defensively, we've seen Dallas. You've seen a lot of teams you can talk about that drop 40 burgers on Minnesota. I just think it's one of those deals. And again, it's Kirk Cousins has an opportunity in prime time in the playoffs to get the monkey off his back. But I just feel like there's something about this Giants team, what Brian Daboll is building. I think it's a massive, we talked about this before the season. If Daniel Jones progresses like we think he can under Brian Daboll, with Saquon Barkley having a full season of health and the numbers he put up, he's up for comeback player of the year. I'm worried about the receiver situation, but guys like Richie James have stepped up. Isaiah Hodgins has stepped up. I think you've got something in Daniel Bellinger. He was hurt a little bit, but I think he has an opportunity in the playoffs to make an impact. I just feel like the Giants have an opportunity, I think, to go on the road and win this game. I feel like it's just there's something in the water, something about this Giants and how they're and the leadership there. And now you don't have to worry about a quarterback. So now when you talk about the draft, you've got your quarterback, you got your franchise guy. To me, there's 17 teams in the NFL right now that can make a quarterback change. I think there's only 15 teams in the NFL right now that I could say that's my guy. And I think the Giants now have solidified that position. They can attack other things in the draft and they can build around what they're doing. And you got Kayvon Thibodeau now as a rookie who's a menace defensively. So I just feel like, hey, I think the Giants upset Minnesota this week.
I would not be surprised whatsoever. I would be disappointed for all my I'm going to be in Minnesota. I'm going to live in Minnesota here in the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, you are.
And my wife and I have already said that we're going to go to games and we're going to be Minnesota Viking fans. But there's just something they just haven't been able to get over the hump. Yeah. So I wouldn't be too surprised. But I will say this: if I'm a fantasy manager and I have Kirk Cousins, or I can draft Kirk Cousins in the 3rd or 4th round and start drafts next year. The guy produces every year, man. I'll tell you. I saw somewhere, maybe it was 2 to 3 weeks ago, everyone's talking about all these guys that should be up for the MVP. And they mentioned Kirk. You and I both listen to so many podcasts.
Yeah.
So I don't know which one it was, but Kirk Cousins is so underrated as it relates to fantasy football.
He is.
Real football, I wouldn't be too surprised if you're right about your prediction. Hey, let's move on. And that's to a huge AFC matchup on Sunday night. NBC 8:15 if you're on the east coast of the country. If you're on the west coast, 5:15. That's number 6 Ravens at the Bengals. The Ravens are expecting, again, no Lamar Jackson. They may not have Tyler Huntley. So here we go again. Much like the Miami Dolphins, they're looking at having to start their number 3 quarterback maybe. And, they don't have that issue with Cincinnati. Cincinnati has got the former Super Bowl starting quarterback for the Bengals and Joe Burrow. They got Jamar Chase. T. Higgins is looking good. Hopefully T. Higgins is feeling okay after that DeMar Hamlin injury because he was involved in the hit. But I like the Bengals in this one, and I like the Bengals making a long run. I would not be surprised if we have a 1989 recap Super Bowl, and that's the Bengals versus the 49ers. I think the Bengals are pretty freaking good.
Yeah, I think the Bengals are really good. And I think, look, as good as Baltimore is, and Thomas Tipple is a good friend of ours with Full Tilt Dynasty. I've been on their podcast a couple of times. He's a massive Baltimore Ravens fan, and it's funny, every time the Ravens game is on, you're going to see Thomas in the comments, right? And just he's so frustrated with Greg Roman's offense and what they do. And now you take Lamar Jackson out of the equation there, and quarterback position is it's like a point guard in basketball, right? If I'm betting on basketball, I'm typically betting on the team that's got the better point guard if I think it's a close matchup, right? And I think in the NFL, and especially in the first round of the playoffs, you can lean on a guy like Joe Burrow, who was there last year. And you talk about Buffalo with DeMar Hamlin and that war cry and wanting to play for him and everything they've got going there. You look at Cincinnati, they went down in that game early on and scored on that first, I think it was the opening drive, went up 7. Burrow went right down the field. He's on point. You look at what he did last year at LSU and his story. And now you look at where he's at. I think there's no doubt Cincinnati right now is playing for, hey, we got screwed at potentially out of the number 1 seed because we think we would have beat Buffalo and we think we had an opportunity there to be really, really good.
They already beat Kansas City, so they had the tiebreaker.
Well, Kansas City, but they ended up the chance to get a higher seed. But I think Cincinnati, like you, I think Cincinnati could make a run. Absolutely. Mixon, I'm a little bit concerned about with that run game, but there's so much in that passing game. I mean, he struggled from an efficiency perspective. I think he had less than 800 yards rushing this year, so he dropped off quite a bit from last year. But I'm with you. I think Cincinnati has got a chip on their shoulder, having been there and lost it. It's Cincinnati. This is J.K. Dobbins is back. I think he's looked great. They don't have the receivers. Rashad Bateman out. You touched on him a little bit earlier in the show. I just don't think Baltimore has enough offensive firepower to stay in this game. So I expect Cincinnati to run away with this one. When I say run away, I mean 10 points or more.
Let's move on to the next one, Coach. And I'm sure you're excited to talk about this one.
Oh, boy.
That's Monday night, NFC game of the week. Number 5, Cowboys, -3 at the number 4 Buccaneers. Buccaneers get that number 4 seed because somehow, some way, with all their lack of wins this year, they still won the NFC South. Monday night, 8:15 if you're on the East Coast, 5:15 on the West Coast on ESPN. The Cowboys, I'll tell you, they have not looked good, man. I think it's weird as an outside observer who doesn't pay attention to them like you do. There's just something about them. I don't know if it's the culture. I don't know what it is, but they seem to not be able to freaking do it when it matters the most. And because of that, and I am not a Tom Brady fan. I respect his game. I respect everything about what he's accomplished in his career. But I'm going with the Buccaneers in this one. I feel like Dallas just can't seem to get it done when it matters the most.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk all day long about Dallas and Tampa Bay. I mean, Tom Brady's 7-0 against the Cowboys. He's never lost to the Cowboys. Cowboys are historically over the last 26 years, they get in the playoffs and they're one and done. They've got one. Dak Prescott has one playoff win. He's 1-3. He didn't look good at all. 14 of 37 against Washington week 18, the game that ended up not really mattering. Their offensive line is a patchwork right now. Tyron Smith does not look good at right tackle. You have Tyler Biotish go down at center. You got to move Connor McGovern from left guard to center. You got to move Tyler Smith to left guard. You got Jason Peters at 41 at left tackle. It hasn't looked good. They've got to figure out that offensive line. The run game has not looked good the last couple of weeks. The only thing that I look at with Dallas, I say, hey, if Dallas can find a way to score first and put Tampa Bay in a situation where they can rush 4 and drop 7 and make Tom Brady have to sit in the pocket and make the right decision. Really, up until the game where Mike Evans went for 3 touchdowns, Tom Brady has not looked like the Tom Brady of old. He's had some struggles. He had that one game when Mike Evans went off where he looked good. They didn't look great last week, and the starters played, about half a game. So there are some things for Dallas that makes the game interesting. There's a pattern right now, and this has been talked about on TikTok, and I think I made a mention of this on Twitter. Dallas' season this year, you lost game 1 against Tampa Bay, right? You win 4 in a row. You win a game, you win 2 in a row. You win a game, you win 4 in a row. Then you win a game and you win 2 in a row. Well, guess what? They just lost the last game. So the pattern is they should win the next 4. That puts you winning the Super Bowl. That's me having fun with it, right? But there's that, and then the Cowboys have not lost 2 games back-to-back all season long. So Dak Prescott's got to get right. They got to figure out the offensive line. It just feels like so many things have to go right for Dallas to win this game, whereas I think Tampa Bay feels like they can show up and they can win because they have Tom Brady, they have Mike Evans, they have Chris Godwin, they have playoff Lenny. Rashad White has come up. So, look, my heart wants Dallas, but I put my money on Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay wins this game. As much as I hate to say it, I just don't see the Dallas way they were playing towards the latter part of the season. And this is even defense. Early on in the year, when Cooper Rush was 4-1 as a starter, he just don't turn the ball over. Defense is going to make plays. Defense is going to flip field position. They're going to turn the ball over. That defense has not looked good for the last 5 games. They have not looked good at all. They're not getting the pressure. They're not getting the sacks. They're not getting the turnovers. They're just not in a good situation right now. So for me, it's Tampa Bay.
That's crazy to think that it's crazy because the records indicate that this should be a blowout. But regardless, here we are both predicting the same thing.
And Dallas loses this game, Mike McCarthy's gone.
Well, there you go. And that leads me to exactly where I'm going. We're hearing all these teams that are getting permission from the New Orleans Saints about who Sean Payton can interview for and who he can't interview for. He's been given permission for Denver. He's been given permission for Carolina.
Yeah.
He's been given, so my point in this, the only solace if I was a Dallas Cowboys fan is if they lose this, they can get in the Sean Payton, a former assistant with the Dallas Cowboys, sweepstakes right away. And maybe we can correct all the wrongdoings over the last, 20 some odd years?
26 years. And hey, and that is the silver lining, because I would love to see Sean Payton get to Dallas. And I think when they lose, Kellen Moore's already gotten permission to talk to teams. I can't remember what the team was. They've already reached out about talking about being a head coach. You've got Dan Quinn, who's been rumored for the last 2 years, what he's done with that defense, being a potential head coach again. This entire coaching staff could get blown up. They lose this game. I don't care if Mike McCarthy's won 12 games back to back. If you go to the playoffs again and you're one and done, like, it's a wrap. Like, it's Cowboy fans are tired of being a great regular season team and then going into the playoffs and not doing anything. So either that needs to be their warrior cry. It has to be enough is enough. And I've said this for years now. If Jerry Jones cared as much about winning as he did making money, this Cowboys would be absolutely phenomenal. They're worth $9 billion. They're the best franchise in the NFL, and it's not even close. And the next best team is worth almost $5 billion. They've almost doubled the next team in terms of what that franchise is worth. And people talk about it's about the star on the helmet, and it's about the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. It's about being on Hard Knocks twice and all the media stuff that comes with it and all the perks these Cowboy players get. Like, I could give a rat's ass. I would trade all of that for the 6th Super Bowl. Like, I don't give a shit about all that stuff. And I think every Cowboys fan is tired of hearing about it. Dak Prescott's got to play well. They got to be able to establish the run, and you got to find a way to get Tom Brady off the spot, because he's not good. He's not mobile, but he gets rid of the ball so freaking quick. You've got to figure out how to take things away. Dallas has got to play where they got to force Tom Brady to throw everything underneath, and we got to come up and we just got to make plays. Make him put long, sustaining drives together. And Cowboys have got to be able to score some points, and I just don't have the confidence they can do it. Here's the other part of it. Love Zeke Elliott. I've been a big fan of his entire career. That offense is just different with Tony Pollard. I am tired of running Zeke out there in the first series, 2 runs in a cloud of dust. Now we're in 3rd and long, and then we finally decide to bring Tony Pollard in the second series. It's playoff time. I want my best player on the field. So either that's both of them on the field, or Tony Pollard needs to start the game. And it's not going to happen that way. So
here's the great thing is we're going to get to see it all play out over the next 5 days. So
that's right.
I'll tell you what, fantasy football season may be over, but playoff football is now starting, and this is when we really get to enjoy the game of football as true fans, not as fantasy football players. With that, we've broken down all of the playoff games for this week. We've talked about our award winners, and we talked about fantasy football players that lived up to their expectations and who didn't. That brings us to the future of the coach approach. And I can tell you this right now, Coach, I'm not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. We may not always get to be on every week because of logistically where I live and the internet and the weather that comes here, but we're not going anywhere. And I'm looking forward to, I don't know about you, but as a fantasy manager, all I've ever heard about was the 2023 draft. All I've heard about were Bijan Robinson and all these other guys. And I can't wait.
Jahmyr Gibbs.
If we're going to be on next week, if we're going to be on the week after, whenever we're going to be on again, we're going to be breaking down the rookie class of the 2023 because it is one hell of a class. And the coach approach led by good old Coach Bruce, thank you so much, applied for the East-West Shrine game, which will be played in Las Vegas. And there's a strong chance that both you and I will be out there. If we are out there and we are sharing a hotel room, we will have a show that Saturday night where we can talk about who we've seen, what we've seen, and what we like. And I can't wait to dive into this class with you, Coach.
I cannot wait. I've already started. I'm in a 2-round Superflex mock draft right now with the guys over at Dynasty Dorks, and we've got a Google sheet going on, and you make your pick. You do a little 3 or 4 cents recap on your player and why you picked them. And I'm now getting into. I will start deep diving into this rookie class starting next week. So I'm excited to start putting those things together. We didn't get a chance to do that this last offseason. We both took a little bit of a break, and we were very fortunate. And can't thank the guys over at Yards Per enough, Alex and Matt Flowers and everybody else that have really helped us put this show together. And I'm super, super excited for Project 32 again next year. I'm going to get a jump on that here in the next 30 days or so leading up to the draft. And of course, once the draft happens, we'll start inserting those rookies where their landing spots are. But I'm excited, man. Looking forward to getting back on with you next week. And hopefully, we'll be at the East-West Shrine game. We'll get a chance to do that. I was going to apply for credentials for the Reese's Senior Bowl as well. But that's out in Mobile, Alabama. And, as much as I love to go visit Alabama, I don't think that's going to be a trip that I'll do. So I'll take the East-West Shrine game in Vegas, and we'll make a good time of it.
There you go. There you go. Hey, one name that I want to say to real quick. And, this is me calling out somebody, but Devon A-Chain out of Texas A&M. If you're going to be in rookie drafts this year, get to know that guy. I realize that a lot of people are worried about his weight. A lot of people talk about how he weighs 180 pounds. If he jumps on the scale at the senior combine or at the combine, NFL combine, and he jumps on that scale and he's over 190 pounds, I'm drafting that guy early, because talk about an explosive player. And this is because I don't have any number one picks in any of my rookie drafts this year. So I'm not going to have the availability to draft a Jamar Gibbs, or I'm not going to have the ability to draft a John Robinson. Devon A-Chain. That dude is a stud. I can't wait to see him play. And I just hope he has some draft capital to make it work. Coach, great show. So good to see you. I hope your family had a great freaking Christmas time. And I look forward to seeing you again when I see you again.
It's Happy New Year, brother, man. We'll see you.
All right. Late, everybody. Appreciate you all.